Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. This is your weekly recap episode where we're here talking about everything interesting happening in NFTs and the broader Web3 world this week. And I am so excited for this week's episode because I am joined today by Blake Finucane, who is the head of ventures and the NFT fund at Pluto Digital, and also an advisor at Resurgence Games. Blake is so savvy about so many things NFTs and Web3 related, and we've been friends now in sort of funny, erroneous ways on and off for months. We've met a couple of different times. And so I'm really glad to have you on the pod to talk through this week and some broad concepts in NFTs right now. Thanks for joining.
I'm so excited to be here. This is one of my favorite podcasts. So yeah, super hyped to get into everything.
So we are going to talk about kind of the general macro situation here today, as we always kick off this show doing that. We're also going to deep dive on Jenkins the Valet and 10KTF, which are projects that Blake is better versed in than I am, but I am fascinated by. So really excited for you, Blake, to really break those down for us. And I think you have an overarching concept, this idea of storytelling as staking, that I really want you to get to. We're going to talk about the royalty problem. That's what everyone's talking about this week in NFT Twitter. I also want to talk about Adam Neuman getting $350 million from Andreessen Horowitz. I actually wrote a little newsletter about this, so we'll break that down. A couple other topics we'll get into. But before we do any of this, I have two things for the audience here. One, we're going to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors. And second, I'm going to ask that you please subscribe wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening to this on one of the podcast apps, please subscribe, rate, review the podcast. It really helps us get more people listening and spread the gospel of Web3 that much further. So here we are, word from our sponsors.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com. There is a brand new staking feature in the Ledger Live app today. We all like staking the assets that we're bullish on, and now you can stake 7 different coins inside the Ledger Live app. Cosmos, Polkadot, Tron, Algorand, Tezos, Solana, and of course Ethereum. With Ledger Live, you can take money from your bank account, buy your most bullish crypto asset, and stake that asset to its network, all inside the Ledger Live app. Through a partnership with Figment, Ledger also lets you choose which validator you want to stake your assets with. And Ledger is running its own validating nodes, offering a convenient way to participate in network validation, and it even comes with slashing insurance. Ledger Live is truly becoming the battle station for the bankless world, so go download Ledger Live. If you have a Ledger already, you probably already have it, and get started securely staking your crypto assets.
Okay, let's just start big picture here. Blake, where are we right now this week in terms of what's happening in the NFT market broadly and volumes, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, what's been really standing out to me is just how low volumes have been on OpenSea. Obviously, there are other marketplaces, which we will be talking about, I'm sure, a little bit later. But volumes have been lowest that they've been this week throughout the entire year. So that's really interesting in the sense of, I think with what's been considered around the ETH merge, ETH prices, going up or, with the hopes of them going up and continuing to rise, I think that really affects everything. We also saw on Tuesday, which I think is a really, really interesting point, we saw the highest number of wrapped ETH to ETH ratio buys on OpenSea for the entire year as well at 40%. What that means, of course, is that people were actually accepting offers on OpenSea instead of, waiting for their JPEGs, as this podcast is called, JPEGs to sell. So again, I think people are getting a little bit antsy considering, okay, let's just sell it. Volumes are low. Let me just accept the general lowball offer. Those are the two things that I'm really watching this week.
And perhaps like optimism about the price of ETH. It's like, you know what? I'll actually take your maybe lowballed offer on my NFT so that I can ride that ETH wave up if people are expecting it to go up. There's a whole other rabbit hole around the merge and whether or not the merge is properly priced in. My guess is that like in a big macro sense, it's not priced in, but in like what we usually see, like the day after the merge happens or after the merge goes through, we'll probably see some price falls. It's like buy the rumor, sell the news. And so I don't know if that is what people are thinking, and who knows, we're all speculating here. If they are like accepting lowball ETH offers because they just want to hodl the ETH through this merge period, I don't know. I think we've already seen a pretty healthy run up of ETH, probably largely on merge news. And I don't know if there's like a ton of room to grow on just the merge itself.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have thoughts on merge being priced in or not.
I mean, I think the general kind of understanding for NFT investors is that when ETH goes up, NFT prices go down. And people are trying to price that in to how they're buying and trading NFTs, right? So with that, I mean, I think that's maybe more of a micro kind of event versus the macro merge conversation. But I think people are bracing for ETH to continue to go up, or they're still trying to recover from this big run up that ETH has kind of had in the last month. So I think it's kind of a mix between recovering from what's just happened and also trying to price in and adjust for maybe what's coming in the next month.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk storytelling as staking, because the macro environment, none of us really know. We can't predict. And it's sort of a wait and see thing as time goes on.
One other thing too, I guess the biggest, everything's, going down and, nothing's working. But then at the same time, a golden Bored Ape just sold for 777 ETH. So it's like,
oh wow, I missed that.
At the actual top. Yeah. So at the top line, sorry. I know we got to move on, but at the top line.
No. Talk about this. We're chill here at Overpriced JPEGs.
We're moving. We're waving. We're vibing. Yeah. So I'm like, at that point, at the very top end, we're still seeing like massive sales. So I think at the top end always, that's less effective, and people will be making big calls and making big plays, because I think people are thinking, okay, listen, the big buyers, the big investors are thinking, hey, this might be the time to really, really capitalize when people are desperate, and it'll still look like really, really big buys and bids at the top.
We talk about, will NFTs decouple from crypto at any point? Does crypto decouple from equities at any point in terms of like their price fluctuations? And in some ways, I feel like what we've seen in this latest bear market is like blue chips decoupling a little bit from things, right? Like blue chip NFTs maybe decoupling from crypto or even the broader equities market. And I actually think that's a beautiful segue, potentially. I'm not exactly sure where you're going with this, but based on my hypothesis, into the storytelling as staking concept, because I'm hypothesizing that there's an element of like people holding on to things when there's like a real story they're getting behind. Though I think maybe what you're about to get into is deeper than that. But so let's do it. Tell me, storytelling as staking, what is this concept? And we'll talk about some specific projects that you think fit into this narrative.
Yeah, I actually think it came from the 10KTF project. That's where I kind of have noticed it being done really well. And really, so...
And is this a term like you've kind of like come up with? Like this didn't come from 10KTF.
Yeah.
You just made it up. You're like, this is like the dynamic I'm seeing play out. Cool.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, we've seen, I guess, the last kind of 6 months as large NFT projects have developed, that there are staking components. That's kind of been the next development. You lock up your NFTs, you get rewarded with maybe an airdrop, maybe with some type of token that's probably not doing very well now, but you get rewarded with something. Now, what I've seen and what I think needs to be happening is we've seen the kind of next wave where the large projects or, some of the upcoming projects, what is differentiating them to it, what I'm seeing is, this gamified experience around, NFT interaction and NFT usage. So what 10KTF has done is really, okay, I have my NFT, clearly we want you to be engaged with the project. So let's do these little kind of gamified periods of, locking up your NFT, which we call in the crypto world staking. And with that, it's not just click a button, sign a transaction on your MetaMask and it's gone and you can't, touch it for, a day or two or, a month or two, whatever it is. What there is there's a process of storytelling within it. So there's a reason why you're staking. You're getting little video clips. You're getting, high quote unquote stakes as to why you need to lock it up. You're saving a certain character in the game. You're building lore. So there's these kind of very entertainment based experiences through the actual process of staking. And I'm seeing that as a really important innovation in community engagement and actually lore building and storytelling. And I'm like, oh, that should be the absolute norm now. And that should be what projects are doing. No longer can it be, okay, just throw your NFT up with the hopes of getting something. Because also what we're seeing is like, a lot of token ecosystems aren't working. So you can't actually promise tokens because that creates whole other issues for projects going forward. So why not do some type of really interesting kind of narrative scenario where you're still excited to go through the process and learn about the project, and you're staking. Maybe you don't even know what the reward is, but you know that, you're learning, you're getting more attached to the community. So I think it's a really interesting thing that's been developing, and I'm seeing it also with Jenkins as we go along. But I'm really excited to see that. To me, represents development.
Yeah, that's super cool, and I want to talk more about it. Let's back up for a second just on 10KTF in case folks are like not familiar with this project. I remember this launching, is it like the end of last year? It feels like it was a while ago that it first sort of like emerged on the scene. Stealth launch, kind of shrouded in mystery. There was like, what's his name? Wagmi San, is that his name? Yeah, Wagmi San or whatever, like Wagmi
you know a lot.
You
know a lot. Yeah.
I remember this happening at the end of last year and checking it out and being like, oh, wow, like this is cool in terms of it's incredibly well branded. I've talked about this before with like Azuki's. I think it applies to Jenkins and Azurbala, which we'll talk about here. Like these projects where when you go to them, I think Goblin Town was good about this, right? Like you go to that website and you immediately get the feeling. You're like, I know what you're trying to make me feel. And you've created a world for me that I'm like intrigued by. So 10KTF clearly had that. Like it's like the kind of lore even early on was like you have this kind of like older craftsman who creates like wearable goods for the metaverse, but it's incredibly well branded. But I was trying to find at the time like who's behind this project. I couldn't get details. Maybe I was just a bad researcher at the end of last year. It's since emerged, or maybe it was always the case. And again, I like terribly researched this, but it's Beeple and Gyosiri. Is that right?
That's right. And what's interesting is, with the Gyosiri variety piece that came out, where he was named, entertainment manager of the year, they talked about him being the man, so to speak, of the whole world. It seemed that they like they officially talked about him being a co-founder of 10KTF. So I'm like, and I will be saying 10KTF, 10KFT. So I completely will always mess up those letters. So you're like,
invert those. It is 10KTF really though, right?
Yeah,
it's TF.
Yeah, TF. I'm like, and you're like, does she even know about the project? She doesn't know the name. I swear I've been participating in it since the beginning. I swear you can trust me on it. But what happened is I was like, ooh, they named him as a co-founder, so it's getting more public. I was like, I really like that. But at the beginning, people would pop in and out of the Discord, the 10KTF Discord. Okay. So that's what I really liked about it.
So we did know it was Beeple from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, he didn't like officially come out and say it was him, but he was always participating. He would pop in and out. So everyone was like, oh, it's got to be a Beeple project. And I learned about it because I was in the Founders DAO, like the Pixel Vault kind of token gated community, like kind of group. And they kept sharing it. And I was like, oh, maybe if I craft some clothing items, I might like lose my entire wallet because I'm interacting with a very sketchy smart contract, but I did it anyway because I was so intrigued by the story, and it was such a stealth launch that, it was kind of a risk to interact with that contract, but I did it because I was really excited about what was happening. And at that time, again, something that they did, I liked it that much. And something that they did, again, that was really, really smart. People always talk about like bootstrapping on other communities or leveraging other communities' followings. And they actually, I think, have executed that better than anyone. And that the only way that you could craft certain fashion items was if you had certain PFP collections, being World of Women, Bored Apes. This is going to be a dark reference. Ani Force very much dates it. So, sometimes we can't be perfect. Yeah. Cool Cats. So at that time, they were doing the blue chip NFTs, and that was the only way you had to actually have one of those in your wallet to get a Genesis clothing item. So immediately they engage these top tier.
So talk about this crafting clothing. Yeah. Explain that briefly for folks who maybe aren't familiar with it.
Yeah. And again, what I love about it is very much connecting to the storytelling of Wagmi-san, this master craftsman in New Tokyo, which is this fictional world. And he is this, amazing clothing maker. So again, these NFTs are actually connected to the story. It's a very kind of fluid narrative, which again, I think speaks to its success. And so they've kind of, at the beginning, at least in the first kind of Genesis drop in the level 1, as they're calling it, kind of NFTs, you could plug in your wallet. And if you owned one of these PFPs, you could then meld the picture of the PFP onto, a backpack, for instance. So your backpack then also became a one-of-one clothing item because no one else could actually use your PFP to craft it. So those were really, really interesting. And then what you were able to do kind of, they again built the story, built the kind of lore around it. And when they did this staking event in this thing called Battletown, you were able then to, again, in Battletown, Wagmi-san is being confronted by the big mafia boss called Boss Toads, which is funny, again, me like talking about this in like a serious way when I understand things are called Boss Toads. But, you're running from the Boss Toads, you're fighting, so you need to stake your gear to support Wagmi-san in fighting against the Boss Toads. Now, again, what's very interesting about this is if you stake certain things and you engage with the ecosystem, then snapshots were taken and you were rewarded with different airdrops of different tools, whether that be like rubber or thimbles, certain things to, again, build clothing. Again, what I think is interesting about this and what I really like about this is they kind of, the snapshots that they took, it was no longer about, okay, just buy and hold this NFT, very passive, and you get airdrop things. It was like, no, what they were doing is they were rewarding engagement. Again, this kind of development on what snapshots should be and how you should reward your community. So really like it for that reason. I think other two things to just really quickly bring up around it is they also did a collab with Gucci, which, again, that was like anything that people that know me, that would be like, I'm all in. Anything collab with Gucci, we're doing it, convinced, hooked, love it. So to me, that was still when it was in super stealth mode, right?
You're like, this is a perfect project. This project was built for me.
Nothing will ever go wrong. Up only, we're laughing, we're good, right? So I'm like, okay, wow, we still don't really know if Gyoceri is involved at this point. We don't really know if Beeple's involved, but what we do know is that they got a partnership with Gucci. Like, this means a lot in the sense of who's behind this.
Involved. Yeah,
we know like Gucci's not going to just partner with anyone. So again, I think when you look at what they did there, again, you could stake. You could actually craft your PFPs to have Gucci clothing on them. Obsessed with that idea. I know that's like very simple, but like I'm convinced. And then you could stake those characters. So again, that to me, incredible in terms of their collaborations. And the last thing I'll say in terms of kind of the hit points of it is it's the only other project besides Bored Ape Yacht Club that's done an ApeCoin airdrop. So that to me speaks to their network, their execution, the kind of vision in terms of the level of projects. If the two people that they partner with are Gucci and then ApeCoin, I'm feeling pretty good about it, in general.
So I'm going to ask you, your career is investing in NFT projects and you run a fund that invests in NFT projects. So I want to get your thought on is this undervalued? Is this a buy in your mind? But before you answer that, I want to go through a couple other questions. So this is all digital wearables, right? Like when you talk about getting a backpack with your World of Women on it, it isn't like you can burn it or something for a physical, right? We're talking all digital here, including with Gucci. Okay. The goal for them with having you stake, could you spell that out? And maybe it feels obvious to folks, but when I think about it, you've got nesting with Moonbirds, which is obviously people don't list the project. It encourages, I guess, more engagement. Then there's staking on the ETH side, which is a security mechanism. So for 10KTF, what is the goal with staking, do you think, for this project?
I think it's a way to really create that engaged community base, get people very comfortable in actively, interacting with the website, with the story, kind of getting more attached to it. Obviously, not listing your NFTs is a huge point that drives the floor up. And then, the thing that was interesting too is that they did staking, you would have to stake for 24 hours. And it was a smart contract in the sense that they actually didn't hold your asset. So again, the safety of it was a lot better than, throwing the asset away and putting, your $100,000 Bored Ape in some contract that you don't really know the safety of. So the way they actually designed their smart contracts was really, I think, helpful for people because they weren't as scared because they didn't actually have to lock up their assets. So that makes a difference too. But the timing of staking too was really important. Only 24 hours or 72 hours basically, and then you were back up. So you had to go back and engage. It wasn't just a one and done. So
yeah. So that's what I was going to say. That's what's so interesting there is it's not just unlike a Moonbirds where it's you nest and you kind of leave it nested for some long period of time and it takes it off the market. This was really a forcing function to bring you to the table. They just want to consistently bring their holders back to the table, it sounds like, to re-engage with the project, catch up on whatever story they're weaving. And this is why that story piece is so critical, because not only are you coming back to the table to stake your thing because presumably you want to get your staking rewards, once you do come back, here's the story that goes along with it that maybe sucks you in. And that's getting into this thesis here around this is what all projects should be doing is if they're gonna they're gonna tell you to lock up your thing, tell me why. How does this fill in the broader vision for this project, the broader story that you're telling?
Totally. And it's it's not just now, I think the stakes are higher where it's not just holding your NFT for the hopes of airdrops and, opportunities to mint more NFTs in the future. It's actually engagement. So, just raising the level up. And I'm happy to see that projects are doing that because that to me is a really good sign for, the NFT gaming space, for the NFT kind of media space, just the NFT entertainment space in general, because it just represents maturity to me in terms of the experience you can have with these assets that you care about so much and what they can actually do for you.
Okay, I want to talk about Jenkins the Valet here as well and Tally Labs and everything that's going on there because I think it's similarly very interesting. But last thing I want to touch on with this 10KTF stuff is there is rumors, speculation, I'm not sure if they're confirmed or not, that 10KTF will in some way be integrated with Otherside. You mentioned already they did an ApeCoin drop. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. But then fill us in on this Otherside 10KTF potential connection.
Yeah, there's lots of teasing. Again, they're very good at kind of creating speculation within their tweets and the images that they attach to their tweets. Again, storytelling via social media. I know that's quite old in normal standards, but I don't think a lot of NFT projects have actually done that very well, and they have. So there's a lot of little hints in certain pictures, and all the 10KTF passionate fans are like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What does this mean? But I will flag a couple things. And little Easter eggs, right? Little hints. So they did do their latest crate sale, which actually the crates revealed today. So exciting about that. Today being August 18th. Again, I know I shouldn't say today. That doesn't make sense in a media world. So what I will say is they raised $7 million in ApeCoin for their crate sale. The actual Ape DAO never approved any kind of grants to 10KTF, which means that they got their ApeCoin from somewhere else. It wasn't like an official, like this is more of like a corporate partnership to me than because there was no official proposals made via the Ape DAO. So I think that's very interesting. Also, again, Guy Osseri, he is the manager of the Bored Apes. He's also a co-founder of 10KTF. That to me makes a lot of sense in terms of where they're going to fit in. There's also speculation that the story itself, the Wagmi-san story, that's going to play out in Other Side. That makes a lot of sense to me in that, why wouldn't it, right? Or why wouldn't there be a sub game, quote unquote, a meta game? The Other Side being the meta game, this insider game being the Wagmi-san 10KTF game, and it really being the first proof of concept for a lot of this stuff around Other Side. So the Ape partnership, the ApeCoin airdrop, the first ever ApeCoin airdrop outside of Bored Apes. I mean, this stuff is hard to ignore. It's just like the partnership and the officiality of it going forward, I think is going to happen when you look at the founders and when you look at their relationships.
Mm. So last question before I get to the $1 million question here that I teased earlier. So you talked about you could put your avatar, your World of Women, it sounds like, in this like Gucci 10KTF collabed wearable. How did that work technically? Like, they made a copy of your World of Women? Like, how did it work?
Yeah.
So like you gave it permission basically to make a new avatar NFT that looked like yours, and then had this extra wearable, and then you can stake those characters to get additional rewards. So interesting. I've been spending a lot of time with like rights and licenses and the IP and who really owns it, and talking to lawyers about all that. So I hear that and I'm like, that's awesome. And also, these are all the challenges we actually really need to sort out on the legal side of things. And in 100%, there's just a lot of questions around that. But
and I know we're going to talk about IP and the limits of certain projects and how they've granted rights to their owners. But I think it represents what can be done around interesting collaborations and pushing IP rights in terms of what you can actually do with the NFTs that you own, and the collaborations that can interweave within that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, $1 million question, Blake. You manage money and invested in NFTs for a living. Is 10KTF a buy?
I will say this with every single investment that I make. It depends what you're buying within the actual project itself. So there's never a blanket yes or no. I don't think it has to be more nuanced than that when you're evaluating a project. And I know that I'm saying this now and it's going to come out today or tomorrow or a week from now, where people are going to be like, you told me to buy this and it's down or it's up or whatever. But
well, we can do all the usual caveats. This is obviously not financial advice. Blake is operating off of a certain set of,
theses,
priors
principles,
and timelines and theses that she's trying to fulfill. And so what she's doing is not necessarily what the rest of us should or need to be doing. Okay. Caveats aside, give us your nuanced evaluation of this from a buy perspective.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to get exposure, so I'll also say the crates, the level 2 is coming out today. So the next kind of gen of wearables and like weapons are coming out today, and they're going to be blanks, which means you need to.
And today's Thursday, August 18th. This episode will air Friday the 19th. So it's the day before it comes out, Thursday the 18th.
Me doing the cardinal sin of media where I didn't actually date the time. I'm just saying today, when it's like people are going to not be listening to it today. So thank you for that. It's certainly clear who the professional is here. So I will say that, with the blanks that are coming out today, you need a PFP to actually craft onto the blank to really be able to use it within the game. So the issue for people around investment with this project is, do you have PFPs that can actually partner with the wearables and the objects to stake? Now, I don't know the next, version of the roadmap that's coming out, but do you have things that can actually partner with the wearables to stake? Normally you need to have both a PFP and a wearable to actually stake. So I would say if you did want to get into the project, the best way to do that would probably be one of the Gucci Grail pieces, because that represents both a profile picture and a wearable combined, and you don't need to own both. And those right now, I think, are sub 1 ETH. So I know that's also super expensive. So I'm telling you to spend, thousands of dollars on this. But if you did want to look at getting certain exposure, I would say that would be a really interesting way. There's also some of the actual crafting material, the rubbers, the kind of cotton materials that are lower price. I think they're going to be around sub 5 ETH, these are sub 0.5 ETH. So if you wanted to get exposure, those would be the best ways. Again, from a fund perspective, I'm going to be making bigger buys because, I'm utilizing different PFP collections that I have. And, making a bet on Web3 fashion, making a bet on the founders themselves, making a bet on the roadmap. So it's a bit more, I would say, I would, do it differently from a fund perspective, but from a retail perspective and look getting exposure. There's a lot of cool opportunities under 1 ETH.
Mm. Do you categorize this as a game, like under gaming, under PFPs, a combination of the two? What is there, and maybe it speaks to what their kind of end game, no pun intended, is, or what they've alluded to it being?
Yeah, what's interesting is I used to categorize with the fund. I used to be like, okay, so we have crypto art, we have PFPs, we have virtual land, and we have gaming assets. Done. Like, those are the 4 categories. You can't really do that now. Mm-hmm. I've been running the fund since February of last year. You can't do that in the same way. Yes, there's certain things like chromie squiggles or, fidenzas that are, iconic crypto art pieces. Certain things do fit more neatly into boxes. But now we're seeing all these hybrid projects where they're PFPs, they're digital fashion, they're games all at once. So from kind of a fund organization perspective, which is why everything in the NFT world is so excited, is because these categories are melding, and that's what makes the technology, I think, so dynamic, is because it's going to be harder and harder to classify these different assets as one thing. But, with this project, I see it more as like, now they're moving more into gaming. So I would probably put it more, which is like, I would say fashion gaming, but there's no perfect definitions now for a lot of these projects.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think my initial reaction sometimes is like that projects should pick a lane. Like, I think of Doodles, that's like very clear. They're like, we're building media, IP, entertainment. And then you have something like Yuga Labs that's like, we're kind of streetwear-y, though I guess they haven't like totally, but they have their kind of fashion stuff. And then they're a game, and then they're sort of an IP. And I think even as recently as like 2 months ago, I was being like, I don't know, that feels muddied. And increasingly I'm like, or maybe not. Like, like if you can pull it off, and if you're, why not kind of play in all the different sectors you can play in and see maybe what sticks, and then double down where it's working, or just continue to build across a whole bunch of verticals if that's working. So I think my thinking on this has even evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I also think not every NFT project should be a fashion brand, and should be a game, and should be a movie, and should be a comic book, so we're seeing a lot of that. And I think a lot of projects are overstepping, and, they don't have the capital, they don't have the the bandwidth and the manpower. But, when I look at something like a Yuga, I'm like, you raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you want to go for it all, that makes more sense than, a small project trying to brand itself against all different kind of like verticals. But I think there's like an upside and downside to both. And I think the kind of muddied waters with some of the projects and their identities has to do with the fact that they started not knowing where and what direction they were going. And then there's all these massive opportunities, and the NFT space, as you know, is evolving so quickly all the time that it's like, okay, like let's do it all and just see what happens. And we have the money to do it. So let's go for it.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. I want to talk about the other project that I think fits into your thesis around storytelling as staking. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's Jenkins the Valet. And I want to do a similar breakdown there. I love this highlighting of 10 KTF. I really appreciate that. I'm like happy because again, this is a project that I've been interested in, but haven't like deep dived on. So getting you to like really be like, sit, focus, Carly, here's what's going on is very helpful for me. And I want to do a similar thing with Jenkins the Valet. So maybe let's do the quick just overview. I think folks know it. Tally Labs behind it. Jenkins the ape himself. Him, has he confirmed it's a he? I guess so.
I think he. Yeah.
I think he is wrapped by CIA, and very clear that they want to have a story world that comes out of Jenkins. They've partnered with Neil Strauss, who's a very well-known, very well, celebrated author to write some of the initial stories for Jenkins. I'll stop there and say, would love to get your thoughts on this. Why does it fit into the storytelling and staking kind of thesis that you've put forward?
Yeah, I think where I see them is, NFTs should be, and I think we're seeing that with the previous example of 10 KTF, NFTs are a new form of entertainment, or that's one way that they can actually be applied. And we're seeing Jenkins really push this idea when it comes to how they're leveraging social media and how they're, leveraging the NFT social media official platform interaction. So some of the things that I think really stand out with them, first of all, they have actually developed in-house software where they're supporting kind of decentralized storytelling and the dissemination of IP rights in a way. So they're a software play as much as they're actually like application layer product play. And I think that software is
like licensing marketplace software. Folks who have listened to this podcast a lot will know I've had like Feature on here before. I had folks from a company called Remaster who are all sort of thinking about this. Feature, was the marketplace behind that Coinbase used to cast the Bored Apes in the Coinbase trilogy story they did. So this idea of like how to license these NFTs for use in stories is an interesting and kind of burgeoning field. And Tally Labs has their own proprietary, basically tech to enable that with Jenkins and the stories they're telling. There might be more? Is there more to the tech than that I'm missing? I know that's one part of it, but it's possible there's more.
Yeah, that's certainly one part of it. I think they're also building a native e-reader so that you'll be able to read books in a kind of like very authentically Web3 way. What that will look like and how they're going to execute on what reading in a Web3 way looks like, we shall see. But I love the idea. It'll be NFT gated. So if you own a Bored Ape that's been licensed to the Bored and Dangerous book, or if you own one of the NFT tickets that allows to get access to have the license for the Bored Ape, then you'll be able to read the book. I think that's very interesting. What maybe the couple things to pull out in this storytelling and staking and where they're really going with this is they're doing, first of all, a lot of their storytelling on Twitter via tweet threads. How Jenkins the Valet is actually moving through this new world called Azurbala. I hope I'm saying that right, which is the world that Jenkins exists and all the Bored Apes will exist within. And they're doing these travel logs and story logs, which are actually first released on Twitter. I love that. I think leveraging where your audience actually is, which is crypto Twitter. Every investor, I'm sure, that owns a Bored Ape or owns one of the actual NFTs that allowed you to license a Bored Ape, they're all on Twitter. So I love that they're actually leveraging that. They've given each of their characters also within the story their own Twitters. They've given certain locations within the worlds their own Twitter profiles. So again, you can just click around Twitter and get these little clues about, oh, okay, this is like a bake shop, or this is, Jenkins' son or whatever, and you can read through and click through. That to me is really interesting. So, this next kind of round of NFTs that they dropped, which I know you've previously talked about on the podcast. So there's a choice and there's this gamified aspect to these new NFTs, the Bored and Dangerous actual books. First of all, there's an audio component to it, which I love, a custom audio component by Murder on the Beats, who's probably best known for working with the king of the world, but also the Canadian King Drake on many of his hits, just in case you guys were wondering. So, the audio component, a very custom audio component, bringing that in again as a branding play for Bored Apes. Like, okay, we're partnering with this, really, really, really popular current, super successful producer to produce the music. Like, okay, cool. That's something you didn't need to do. It adds a bit of edge. It really supports that Bored Ape kind of like street urban where energy that they have. So again, I think that layer is really consistent, so I like that a lot. And then what you're able to do and what the next round is that's going to happen throughout the summer is, okay, so you have your book, this is where the gamified kind of storytelling and staking really comes. You can burn your book or you can stake your book. Now, when you're burning your book, so bear with me with this story. It's a bit crazy, but apparently there's this part of the Azurbala world where you're able to go and actually burn your book, and you're going to be able to get a mint pass, which is then going to be turned into your PFP. So they're going to actually be doing a PFP collection and drop.
For your PFP for in Azurbala.
Exactly. So that's going to be a next step for them. Again, I think their thesis is, listen, we understand that most people, their biggest purchase within their NFT world is their PFP. That's kind of the in the real world, obviously, like most people spend the most money on their houses. Most people in NFT crypto world spend the most money on their PFP. So we want to make one to really show and build this up as the most important dynamic PFP that there is, maybe alongside Bored Ape and again, leverage and bootstrap that energy to build their own. Now, what you're able to do, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, what's the benefit? And we're working on a little bit of a lag here. So I think that's part of the problem is so if you burn the book in this choice, you get a mint pass for the PFP that you can use in Azurbala, essentially in the metaverse world. They're sort of teasing. What's the benefit to keeping the book?
The benefit to keeping the book is, again, staking, and then you're going to be able to get the native currency within the world. And the interesting thing...
So it's the choice between your PFP or the currency.
Exactly. And the other interesting thing is, when you're burning the book, I guess, again, this storytelling, the lore within the world is that when people have kids within Azurbala, they have to sacrifice to the gods before they have kids. So what you're going to actually have to do to burn the book to get the mint pass to birth your PFP is go to this little area within the actual world and burn and, sacrifice your book for the purpose of then birthing your PFP later on. So I'm like, they didn't really need to do that. Again, it's the details. It's the kind of really the nuance of the storytelling that I really like from them. And the more you hold your mint pass, the more likely you are to actually, the longer you hold it, the more likely you are to get a more rare PFP. So there's even gamified aspects around the burning of the mint pass to eventually convert.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I'll I guess bolster what you're saying here in terms of, again, when you go to the Azurbala site, which you can find on Twitter, and we'll put links for both the Jenkins stuff and the 10KTF stuff below if you want to learn more. You immediately have that feeling of there's a world here, and it's this jungle kind of wild world, and you can look at this map overview. It reminds me of the map you get in the beginning of a fantasy novel you read, that shows you the fictitious world that you're about to enter into. It's my heart just starts going a little faster. I'm yes, I'm about to be immersed in some story that's going to take me, I'm going to escape my everyday life and enter some new world. And you can click around on the map and go into little corners of the map and explore there. And like just across the board, the details are incredibly well done.
Yeah. And, it's really again, there's a lot of, because the space is so new, there's a lot of people talking about kind of these conceptual ideas about, community collectively owned media studios and, large decentralized IP ownership. But, I do think that Jenkins is really executing on this. They're really the first instance where NFT holders have had an opportunity at scale to capitalize on IP ownership. And really be a part of a collectively owned media studio, because there's also going to be a DAO that Tally is working on within the Jenkins universe. So
let me ask you, so because this is the piece that I'd love to understand, is a piece I'd love to understand better. Like they have something called is it the writers token, where like there's the original like
Writers'
5,000 Valet, Jenkins Valet NFTs, and that these are all like writers' room, quote unquote, NFTs. So explain a little bit how the community is ushered into the creative process as part of all this. Because I'm like sort of on the record as a little bit of a skeptic of like group creative processing. Like I'm like, I think it can work really well when you have a couple creative visionaries at the top. And my sense is that Jenkins is finding the balance between these two things, and would love to hear you kind of spell that out.
Yeah. So what has happened is at the beginning when they did their initial mint, you had, they did these 5,000 NFTs, and this represented royalties of the book that they were going to publish about the apes, about Jenkins. Now, what they needed with that, or what they invited the community to do, is you needed to partner with a Bored Ape or a mutant ape to actually use within the book. So a lot of people that obviously bought these initial NFTs had their own apes or had their own mutants, or they partnered with someone who did. Perhaps they went into the Boys Club DAO, put it on the chat room to do. That's how I actually got connected with someone, and license, shout out that license, so I could license certain things in the Bored Ape universe that I owned, and started in the project then. But from there, when you actually, and that was proprietary software, what they actually used around the licensing stuff there, that was their own software. It was a super seamless process in terms of signing over the rights for Tally Labs to tell a story about your ape, use the image rights, all that stuff. And then what they sent you was this form where you could add and write about your ape. So the writers could read what you thought about your ape and weave that into the story. So it's kind of like a process where they really kind of let the community make up their own lore about their apes, but also, hey, we're going to take it from here and we're going to read what you have to say, but we're also going to, do it ourselves. So I remember writing some of the lore for my ape, and I was like attached. Like I was like, okay, like this is where they're from. Like I was like, my ape's from Vancouver, which is where I'm from. Like I made it like really personal to me, and I was like, oh my God, like this is quite an emotional exercise. So again, in terms of actually driving value back to the Bored Ape community, I'm like, people, when they write lore and storytell about their asset, it's harder and harder to sell. And what you got then on the licensing side was you're going to get, if you license your ape, you get 25% of the royalty sales of your little piece. And the person who actually owned the NFT gets 25%, and then the Bored Ape or the Jenkins took 50% of pieces of that kind of 100% pie of royalties. But by licensing your ape, you take a 25% cut of royalties, and that's a ratio of, there were certain levels of NFTs you could buy, and the more expensive, rarer NFTs took a bigger percentage and cut of royalties versus kind of the lower end of just the valet tickets. The yachts are the biggest, and those were the most expensive. And they also, those apes that were licensed via yachts, they're going to play the biggest role in the story. So again, that leads back to driving value to your apes, driving value to owner, like getting eyes on your exact asset, all of that kind of all at once.
Mm-hmm. So, and it strikes me that much like with 10KTF, like this is complicated. Like this is not like a project you're going to grasp in like a minute, you know, like there's a lot to kind of unpack here. But it strikes me that that's also why you have an especially committed community, right? And that it's that in-depthness to it all that creates a really engaged following for the people that do go deep like you've gone. But let's do what we did with 10KTF, because I think that was so helpful, which is you are deep in this. You're like, I love talking to you because you just know it all. What would be your recommendation for folks who want to get into this project? Because there are a couple different ways in now. There's the Born Dangerous NFTs that'll be the burn, that'll have the burn mechanism down the line. You've got the kind of original valet all the way up to yacht, like writer's room NFTs. How can folks like start to break into these projects?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is that the lowest end of the writer room NFT is almost the same price now as the Bored and Dangerous books. And a lot of the Bored and Dangerous books will also presumably get burned because people will want a PFP. So that burning event hasn't happened yet. Right now, I think the Bored and Dangerous books are at, again, about half an ETH, give or take. I think that's quite a good price. Again, obviously, it depends on your budget, where how comfortable you're going to be. But you know, I obviously as well, we were just talking about, you know, very low volume on OpenSea. You can probably throw in some really low bids and get some offers. That's always a good way to go. So, you know, I think the Bored and Dangerous is probably the best entry. And right now it's the cheapest. And it's also, I think, because these projects are so complicated, the best way to understand them always, which again, I think is one of the issues with crypto and NFTs, is oftentimes to understand things, you have to participate in the ecosystems, and that costs money. So the barrier to entry is always so extreme. And it's like, that's really tough, because when I'm explaining it to people, it's like, well, what does this matter? It's like, no, but I swear, if you went through the process and if you own this stuff, it would be different. But oftentimes I think with NFTs, it demands ownership to really understand. And, you know, most people don't have, you know, thousands of dollars lying around to invest in something that is highly speculative.
Super speculative that they're wrapping their head around. Well, we'll move past this phase at some point in kind of the journey of this technology.
Exactly. I think this is totally, this is the second tier, I think, of, you know, this deep engaged storytelling, which is more complicated. And I think it kind of needs to get more complicated before it comes back and gets more simple. But I think, again, it's good growth and maturity for the NFT space and for these projects.
Yep, absolutely. These projects and to your point about Jenkins, like it's also driving the space forward to some extent technologically as well, in terms of paving the way for this kind of thing to just be a better UI for other projects. Okay, we've been talking a bunch about, or dancing around the idea of licensing here, and obviously that's connected to what's going on in a couple of ways. So I want to talk about the Meebits and CryptoPunks new license that came out this past week. This is a big deal to me as somebody who's, again, been spending a lot of time living in like the vagueness of licensing structures up to this point, and talking to lawyers about like, what are the implications for sort of poorly written terms and conditions, which, for example, Yuga Labs, their original terms and conditions are kind of a mess in terms of trying to navigate them from a legal perspective, which is, of course, just speaks to the fact that the Yuga Lab founders did not anticipate that Bored Ape Yacht Club would be like a multi-billion-dollar brand in the next 12 months, and that they would need to have like a super buttoned up, like highly professional and, license. And also speaks to the fact that we're just in uncharted territory, generally speaking, in this space. But to give some context here on this Meebits Punks license that just came out, I've said this on the podcast before, but quick recap. Obviously, in February, March of this year, Yuga Labs purchased Meebits and Punks from Larva Labs. They said at that time that they would be giving IP rights to the holders of Meebits and Punks. That's, of course, what they famously did with apes themselves. Larva Labs did not, had retained the rights to Meebits and Punks, so you as a holder didn't have those IP rights. Yuga said they would be reversing that now that they owned them. And this week is the week we finally actually got a look at those licenses. And I have to say, like, first glance, I'm pretty happy with them. I think they clear up a lot of areas where there has been like misperceptions in the past. The biggest one that I'll highlight is, I think historically, it's not been clear, like, does Yuga Labs also own rights to the punk or to the ape IP, or do only the holders all have the rights to the ape IP? Like the narrative had always felt like, oh, I as the ape holder, like I am the owner of this IP and I almost like alone own it. So what's interesting though is when you're looking at these new Meebits Punks licenses that have come out, is they are explicitly saying it's an exclusive license for you as the holder of the Meebit or the punk. And so that would mean that's like sort of Yuga Labs like wiping their hands clean of it, right? And saying, okay, we do not have rights to this IP. You are the exclusive IP holder of this if you own this this punk or this Meebit, with a couple of exceptions, which we'll get into because what's interesting about the exceptions they carve out here is they are slightly different. The carve outs are slightly different when you look at Meebits versus looking at punks. So I'll actually pull this up here. It's in a section essentially called License Back to Yuga Labs. So this section exists for both the punks and Meebits licenses. It says basically that you grant to Yuga Labs an irrevocable, perpetual, exclusive, universe-wide, royalty-free sub-license. Basically, we as Yuga Labs still have the right to use your characters and publicly display your characters for the purpose of like promoting or exhibiting like the Meebits collection or the Punks collection. You can't like sue us for using that. We have a right to use it. And then within that, this is where the Meebits license gets different, which is what the Meebits license says, which is different than the Punks license, is it says that Yuga also has the right to create and authorize third parties to create avatars, characters, and other objects based on your Meebit art designed for you to claim and use in one or more metaverse or other digital environments or applications, provided, however, that any such claim is subject to these other things. So basically, this is a Meebits has this, CryptoPunks doesn't, because Meebits is very from its outset has been designed to be a metaverse avatar, and its goal is around like an interoperable metaverse. And Danny Green, who's now the brand lead for Meebits at Yuga Labs and had previously been running Meebits DAO, has come on the pod and talk about this. Like Meebits is really trying to be an avatar that stands for interoperability in the metaverse. And so this carve out here in this license is really speaking to that specifically, which is giving Yuga Labs the right to partner with third parties to create like a pixel rendition of your Meebit for World Wide Web, for example, so that when you go into World Wide Web, you can log in with your wallet, automatically claim your Meebit in the pixel form that fits that world and that metaverse, and now you can go off and run around as your avatar without you having every time to like approve it with every different metaverse that you might want to use it in. I think that's awesome. I think that's exciting. I think it shows that like the commitment with which Meebits is approaching this goal of like metaverse interoperability and they being characters in the metaverse. But I've now ranted, so I will pause here and let you react to all of this.
No, I love it. And I love your details of actually reading through certain parts of the contract that stand out, because I think in general on social media, but with the closest reference I have to social media being crypto Twitter, everything kind of gets abstracted and flattened, like and put in generalities. So for you to actually dig into the contract, I think is super, super refreshing, and the specificity of that. Because I think people are like, okay, yeah, granting rights done. Like when the real, I think, crux and the real kind of insight into these projects comes in the details of the certain limits and the certain upsides around the IP ownership. So I love that you actually just dug into that and read that out. I also think, thank goodness, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I think in general too, as someone, my fund does hold Meebits, and like, thank goodness for some news. You know what I mean? Like, let me rejoice in that, because we need something. So, and I know that's also memed all over the place. Oh, finally Meebits, something. But really happy just from a price. I mean, it hasn't really affected the price, which I think people are quite fatigued and quite confused by Meebits still. And a lot of people have written them off, and a lot of people have lost so much money, have made really bad sales, way under what so again, lots of buying opportunities for people if they want them. If you believe that Meebits is really what they're really going to work on. I think, again, the placement of Danny Green coming over and working full times on Meebits huge upside.
Yep.
I guess my question would be to the Meebits team around these. I also think super positive on that clause around being able to use Meebit likeness for avatars. Like, great. Continue to create projects, create products, and create partnerships. I would say I want to know what they're really thinking on that side of things. What partnerships are they going to do? Is this more of an other side play? Are they going to try to, really make Meebits a big avatar in that? I think before that happens, they need to create some bigger partnerships to drum up and do a proof of concept for what they're trying to do within the other side world.
Yep. And I can speak to that a little bit, and I'm afraid I may get certain details wrong, but I know, I believe they were working with World Wide Web specifically. They've worked with Decentraland previously. Like they have coals in the fire. I know that Meebits DAO had been working on this stuff, like to get them avatars and partnered with a couple different other metaverses. We're in this really weird place with metaverses, right? Which is like essentially the
even the
challenge
term
that
itself.
Totally. It's like it's sort of lost meaning to people, and it's all the stuff that other side is I think trying to fix, which is like metaverse sounds like this cool thing, but then what we get are like these places where we just kind of run around in the forests and there's like 200 people a day logging in because there's really not that much to do yet. So I think
there's more
obviously
people
this
working for Yuga Labs
than hanging out in any of the existing like sort of big name metaverses. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the commitment is very real in terms of not just being for other side, though I'm sure that's obviously like a big part of this. And I think the commitment, I'm fully bought in at this point that the commitment from Yuga Labs in terms of wanting an interoperable metaverse is very real. I interviewed the CEO of Improbable, for whom that's clearly a goal, and they're building these like
which I love that podcast
technologies. Thank you. So I'm excited for this, and I love Danny. He's been like a friend as well as a colleague to me at this point. So I'm optimistic about him. Never financial advice, but I'm hopeful Meebits can have some price action in addition to just like broader like community engagement.
Yeah, because I think it's still like quite again conceptual using avatars in the metaverse when the CryptoPunk community and the Bored Ape community are so like they have such strong identities, they have such strong values and but Meebits is still like, I don't know what it stands for. It's just going to be an avatar in the metaverse. What does that mean when it doesn't really represent anything? Is there going to be other upsides versus just kind of putting yourself as an elephant or an alien within a metaverse? What's the differentiator, so to speak, for Meebits versus the other two big properties?
Yeah, I think it's such a good point, and I think it gets to the importance of storytelling, because when Meebits launched after Punks, it was really innovative in that, and it was one of the first projects, if not like the first project, that had these like 3D what's the word I'm looking for? Like you could download like 3D Vox files basically for your Meebit. So it was birthed with this intention of like you can be a real like avatar that runs around in a place, because from day one essentially you could get these 3D Vox files for your Meebit. And so that spoke to like the mission of the thing. But that's like a nerdy technological like cool thing. It's not a storytelling, I'm immersed in a world cool thing. And notably Meebits and Punk or Meebits and Apes launched I think like the same week or something, and there was all these people who bet on Meebits, and then of course Apes ended up sort of being the bet. And that's that key distinction is Meebits fundamentally was like a really cool tech innovation, and they're like cute little characters, but maybe not even innovation, right? But it was like a tech play, and what made it unique was a little bit more conceptual. And what people loved about Apes was like kind of the like irreverent middle finger, like expressiveness of this ape's face, and it felt more like a story, and you could go right on this wall. And so there's a lesson in there to be learned. But I hope that that core ethos of interoperability and like opening up the metaverse becomes more of like a branded story for the Meebits, because if they can tap into that, then I think there's a lot of room to grow.
It's there. Yeah. It's there for them. And I think now, people just, the use case is not there as much as the storytelling, like the use case for a lot of these NFTs is still storytelling and community building. And, it's, with who they've hired, clearly the upside is massive. So I'm feeling quite hopeful.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
MetaMask is the leading Web3 wallet to get you access to everything you need in Web3. If you're just getting started on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. And if you need to fund your MetaMask account in order to buy that NFT that you've been eyeing, well, now you can do that directly through MetaMask. Just click the blue buy button on the home screen. Personally, I'm mad that I've spent extra gas fees transferring money from Coinbase to MetaMask in order to buy NFTs. I've been using MetaMask directly, and it is so much better. You can also buy stable coins and native tokens from Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, CeeLo, and others, and you can do it directly with your debit card, your credit card, through Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there is now an improved buying experience on MetaMask Mobile. You'll only see tokens that are in your region, so it's personalized to you, and you'll get real-time quotes, so you know you're always getting the best deal. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask yet, what are you waiting for? Go try it out. You can learn more about buying cryptocurrencies with MetaMask at metamask.io/buy-crypto. Okay, we got to cover the royalty. Quick tip: we got to talk about the royalty situation. This is obviously the issue du jour in NFT Twitter, and it's a pretty serious one. Again, I'll give the very quick context, pass it over to you, Blake, for thoughts. But Sudoswap, a decentralized automated market maker for NFT sales, basically announced recently, or at least we all realized recently, that they we're no longer enforcing artist royalties or creator royalties for sales of NFTs. So that means you can sell your NFT without having to give a cut to the original creator. This is I don't know, it feels kind of existential. It feels like one of the big selling points of NFTs for artists, for tickets, for all these future use cases is built around this idea of royalties. And it's a little bit of a kick in the stomach to really come face to face with the fact that this is a very, very hard thing to enforce at the smart contract level. It's, I guess, arguably an impossible thing to enforce at the smart contract level. And so we're really reliant on marketplaces to kind of do the right thing here, which is never what you want in a market dynamic, because when, financial incentives come up against do the right thing, what we typically see is people go with financial incentives. So not doing the right thing. So Blake, give me your thoughts, your reaction. 6529 had a take on this. I know somebody else you were looking at had an interesting take. Hit me with your thoughts.
Yeah, first, so just for the quick 30 seconds of how, I got into NFTs, I'm an art historian. I was doing my master's degree in 2016, and I thought, oh my goodness, crypto technology actually answers the questions that artists have been asking for a really long time around, tracking the authenticity of their work, tracking the patronage of their work, and actually allowing royalties on chain. I thought that was a revolutionary idea. And that's why I actually started writing about crypto art in 2016, was because of this very issue. And that's what made me really excited about NFTs. So this is something that's really close to my heart. So I think this is really what NFT culture has actually been built on, is supporting artists directly. And I think it comes down to really, it really, questions of, oh, I'm in this for the art, I'm not in this as an investment. I'm not, these kind of questions really get highlighted. And what also gets highlighted is, that people really need to make choices about what they believe in around this stuff, which again, these are existential. I'm like, I'm just trying to buy a picture. Do I need, and then ethics and values come into this. So, I mean, my thought is that all NFTs are actually not created equal. And there maybe can be nuances in which, if you are supporting a one-of-one artist, to really be prioritizing supporting them and paying those royalties to them. I understand, this is also a bear market question. When you're down really bad, when, you see that, they've done, 1,000 ETH in volume, it's really hard to want to take an extra 10% cut when, they just raised a big VC round and, they're worth, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that, NFTs are not all the same thing. And there might be, where I see this going is specialized marketplaces. Where I see this going is ways in which people need to really be actively informed in making choices on who they're supporting, because it really does make a difference. And if you think that not paying royalties to an independent artist isn't going to have residual effects on their work going forward, it's not going to happen, and it's going to change the entire NFT landscape.
Well, that's the financial incentive answer to the contrary, right? To that says don't use the AMM, because if you want the thing you're holding to appreciate in value, which I guess if you're selling it, maybe your skin's off the game at that point, but like you need to continue to support that project. And so it becomes a buyer thing too, right? Where that's where if you're buying, if there's somebody selling and you're the one who's then buying, like making sure there's royalties, because you want that artist supported to continue to do well for what you're doing. So it might be like a buyer side fix, but I hear everything you're saying and I'm like, we're screwed, because it's already so complicated to get into this world and to get into NFTs and crypto art and all this stuff. And like any additional layer of like, you need to be informed and do your research that becomes part of that package is like not good for the space. Here's why I think I don't think all hope is lost, because I do think this is something that we can there are some technological answers here. Nothing is like the foolproof thing I would love it to be, but I want to throw out a couple ideas. One that I've heard from a couple different camps is, you have a centralized list of marketplaces or, a database basically of marketplaces that do enforce royalties, and then baked into smart contracts, you basically have a smart contract that goes and calls up that list, checks whether or not you're trying to list it for sale in one of the marketplaces that's on the list. And the list can be ever expanding as more marketplaces come onto the scene, and then automatically stops something from being listed for sale on a marketplace that doesn't enforce artist royalties. Again, like real imperfect, like kind of crazy to think that we have to just like keep a list of these marketplaces and who is it a DAO, like who's running that list. Like it gets a little strange there. And I also have some vision of like, is there some way for there to be some convention in code for how marketplaces write the like kind of fee collection, and then you have a smart contract that can basically read that standard, and so knows that fee collection is being enforced because they're basically reading the code in which it's written that it's that in which like that fee collection is dictated by, and that becomes a more decentralized way to do it. Again, imperfect. I actually don't. I think the technical feasibility of it feels like it's probably right, but it's also a little complicated, and it doesn't really solve the problem for smart contracts that are baked, locked, and written for all of these sort of historical collections. So, look, I'm glad we're having this conversation now, because better now than in, I don't know, in like, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, like better to kind of get on it earlier. The best time to have figured all this out would have been 2 years ago. And the next best time to figure it out is immediately. So I'm glad the conversation's being raised, but I almost hate having it because it makes me so uncomfortable, because I really am like, this is awful. Like, let's just enforce royalties according to what the artist and creator want.
And I mean, at the issue is too, there will always be incredible collectors. I know you've had a lot of them on your show where they're in it for the art. They're in it for the culture. They believe in that. They understand the full circle spectrum of what NFTs actually are. And that, if you start taking cuts, it actually has residual effects. on collections, on models in terms of how people release NFT collections in the future. Like, it'll change the whole game. But there will always be investors, there will always be traders, there will always be flippers, which also power the NFT world, as you know, and they will always prioritize short-term profit for, you know, things going forward. And it wasn't what they won't really take into account what will happen, you know, 3-4 months or years down the road. Also, though, at the same time, you know, as we know, crypto technology is supposed to be trustless. It's supposed to really give you the freedom that you. I don't mean to use the term freedom. I know that's you know, a really intense term to use, but it gives you the choice.
Has that been like politicized?
Yeah, well, okay. I don't know. I mean, I know I'm Canadian. You know, who's to say? But you know, it's
I can't keep up these days. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I know, and I'm like, you know, I don't want to bring in these big words, but it gives you the choice to actually, you know, make a call on. You know, these are, at the end of the day, these are peer-to-peer transactions at a protocol level. So we're engaging with NFTs at the application layer, which is a layer above. Now, the beautiful thing about crypto is that you can always go to the layer below. You can mint and trade directly from, you know, Etherscan if you want. You know, you can really, it gives you the choice to do things, which is the beauty of it all. So it's like, how do you kind of balance those two, where it's this full kind of just availability of whatever you want to do, reflective of your needs and your values, and at the same time acknowledge creators and the real heart and crux of what NFTs have really been built upon, which is this creator royalty. You know, I don't think Bored Apes, I don't think they could have really been built if it wasn't for that. I don't think, obviously, a lot of the incredible one-of-one artists could be operating and pushing the space forward if not for creator royalties. I do think all of that is super, super important. I also think, you know, we've seen, you know, eBay was a generalized marketplace, and now we see Etsy and Airbnb, and we see whatever, Expedia, for, you know, you see these specialized marketplaces. I hope maybe another thing that can happen is that we can move to specialized marketplaces. So maybe you don't want to pay for the royalties for Bored Apes, even though you've probably made a bunch of money if you invested early and they've done a bunch of work. But beyond that, maybe you're just like, nope, not paying. Cool. Maybe that doesn't make a big of a difference than supporting a one-of-one artist, which, you know, Archipelago is an interesting marketplace that's come out that's, you know, only, I think, supporting generative art. You know, I think, again, the maturity of the space hopefully will allow different marketplaces to exist where you go and support, and there's a curatorial aspect to engaging and buying with works that, you know, support artists, which is who really needs it. So I hope that's where it's going.
Yeah, you know, I said earlier we're screwed because I do think that, but I do think that, you know, this is going to persist as a problem. But if I'm being honest, like holistically, I'm somewhat optimistic. I think we can contain this to a subsect of transactions, and
me too.
In the macro sense, this space is still a win, and it's still clearly a win for digital artists whose old methods were like, I guess I'll make a print of my work and sell a print of this digitally native piece that I made. And you still now have a way to make digitally native one-of-one art in a way that was just never previously possible. So we'll end on that note of optimism. And maybe I'll say this, pulling from 6529's thread about this, I think he made an interesting point, which was around tipping, which of course the United States has like a particularly distinct and kind of strange tipping culture, because it makes up such a bulk of like service staff's like wages. But we do, like, you know, nobody is forcing me to tip, and I would never dream of like not tipping well. And so, you know, we do create cultural standards where not literally everyone abides by them, but most people do because they believe in it. So, okay, let's go. Final topic here today, and we don't have to dwell on it for too long.
Yes,
Adam freaking Neuman is back. The thing none of us needed or wanted or asked for. I wrote I'll plug. I started a newsletter basically had some wine, and it's been something I wanted to do for a while. I kind of flippantly was like, I had 2 glasses of wine and started a newsletter. But the truth is the 2 glasses of wine were just like the liquid courage to like get me to push over the finish line, because I wanted to start one for a while. So we'll link to that maybe too. Have y'all go subscribe. Blake, I noticed you had subscribed. Bless you. I appreciate you.
Yes, I was going to say, I subscribed, and also it's a great article. Carly goes through, like, it kind of digs outside of the kind of flattening again of kind of crypto Twitter and just the headlines, and actually digs into some of the stats around WeWork and Adam Neuman himself. Also noting, obviously, that he's taller than Jared Leto and better looking, which really stood out to me.
He is more handsome. The debate that people need. Adam Neuman is more.
No debate for me. I agree. That's why I brought it up. So I'm with you.
Detected.
Yeah, no lies detected.
So I've been really interested in the WeWork. I love these, like, I was fascinated by Theranos. Like I've if there's these kinds of stories, I read the books on them. I will say, and I say this in the article, like I don't think the comparison between WeWork and Theranos is like really a valid one. Like there's like certain like small overlaps there. I think you could argue, but like, you know, Adam Neuman did build a legitimate business in the sense that like WeWork still exists and people still use it, and it might even become profitable next year or in the next couple of quarters. Like there's a huge difference between that and like a completely fraudulent blood, non-existent like product that's hurting patients. But I'm like fascinated by these things. So I've tracked the Adam Neuman thing for a little while. And I mean, my thesis of this article is like, he'll probably make A16Z money. Like he clearly is a bit of a visionary. And the reality is like we know his flaws now really well, and presumably A16Z knows his flaws really well. And if A16Z does their job, like they can put a lot of kind of fences around the kind of Adam Neuman pitfalls and aren't going to fall for the same kind of shit that caused such an issue the first time around, in terms of just he amassed so much power that was totally unchecked, and that allowed a lot of bad behaviors to flourish. And he really didn't look at like the fundamental financial proposition that was out in front of him. And, assuming they curb that, I think there's actually a chance that this will hit. And I say it with such a begrudging, because it sucks. Like it sucks that like in this world, Adam Neuman is getting more money. And I don't think he's that remorseful over what went down at WeWork. And I think he should be. And so, it brings me no pleasure to say that I think this actually isn't the worst bet for A16Z, but I don't think it's the worst bet for A16Z.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think it's a absolutely bonkers proposition, but when you really dig into, from a VC perspective, from a fund perspective, which again, abstracts all the real nuance or details about how things got from A to B or A to Z, whatever, like what matters really when you look at the numbers, I think, which again, this is begrudgingly, I looked today actually, and WeWork's market cap is over $4 billion. It was at around a 6 or 7 until October, obviously, when, every tech stock, not that WeWork is a tech stock, but, everything kind of.
But it's in that growthy category because
it's in that growth. Exactly. It's in the milieu of all of that. Yeah. And so, okay, it's at a $4 billion valuation. Adam started it. Clearly he's not involved now, but when you look at A16 now investing at a $1 billion valuation, when you look at the numbers, it's like, okay, easy 4X, here we are. And this is, these are and as you said, WeWork might be profitable next year. So when you dig into those, just the top line numbers, certainly they're thinking this is a double, triple, I think they're betting on it being like a 4X, just like WeWork is, if we're looking at the current valuation. Yeah. So when you look at the numbers, I'm like, outside of all the other stories, that really stands out to me as a general kind of thing. On top of that, the cult of the founders, VCs are way more likely to bet on founders that have done something before, even if it's failed, let alone if, unfortunately, now it's a $4 billion business. So, that plays into it too.
Yeah. And, I hear people saying, and I don't want to minimize this, like WeWork raised like $22 billion. So it's like, oh, congratulations. You built a $4 billion company having raised $22 billion. All you did was light $17 billion on fire. Yeah. But a couple things to flag there. Yeah. One, his early investors still made money because his early investors who came in at the initial valuations did fine. The second thing is, he was operating in a macro environment that was like grow, dominate the category. Masa, who is the head of SoftBank, who like famously, like he asked for less money. Masa was like, "Let me give you more so that you can go out and just dominate this category." So there were a lot of external like pressures around taking more money. Like that's not to say he needed $22 billion to build a $4 billion business. And that ties into the learnings that I think he can bring with himself, or A16Z can force him to bring with himself by putting the right checks and balances in place this time around, which is fundamentally understanding the business you're in. You're not in a tech business, you're in a real estate business, which means the margins are different. It means the way you're going to calculate valuation are different. But if you're really upfront and honest about that from the beginning, you can buy up a bunch of real estate, which he's done. This is like a co-living brand. You can really brand it the way he's branded WeWork. WeWork is a globally understood and recognized brand. And, start leasing these apartment buildings basically for more than you own them for, more than what you owe on them, because you've added some like slick marketing on top. And we're in an era where people want more mobility. They want to be able to move more freely and connect with people. And we're working from home, so you want connections. Like you can market all of those things and probably make up, and mark up the price. Like there's a genuine business there. And Adam Newman's done it in real estate already once before.
Exactly. And I think the other thing to flag there is, first of all, what I wouldn't have to be in the room when he is pitching Mark Andreessen, like the mesmer, like I know like he is like he is a hypnotist. I would have that would have been a stunning scene to see. But, also just to flag that he invested out of his family office in a property management app and in a mortgage app. So I see that. I'm like, okay, maybe there's also, again, not just like a concrete kind of asset play, but also a software play. Yeah. When you combine those two together, that is like, in terms of valuations from a VC perspective, people love that. I understand right now he's just an investor, but I'm like, that's ripe for kind of takeovers. Yeah. Again, in terms of like skillfully building value and building valuations, acquisitions like that, brilliant. So I'm like, he's really setting himself up. Yeah. I also think so in that sense, and it's a perfect kind of post-COVID play around, co-living for young people. Like again, wild buzzwords that I just used, but you know what I mean? It's like work from home, community building, all that. It's like NFTs for the real world. Yeah. So I would say that. And the other thing that's interesting that I know is like not that related, but that this is called Flow, and his previous investment that A16 also invested in, it's called Flow Carbon. I'm like, where's the crypto play? There's got to be one. Is it that you can buy with crypto? There's some type of weird like staking or, like, I don't know, rent to own and stake to own, who's to say? But I think there's lots of opportunities there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I was going to flag that as well, that this isn't the first time he's gotten money from Andreessen Horowitz in the last like 6 months. They invested like $70 million in Flow Carbon, which has like delayed the launch of their token, but it's, it's essentially buying carbon credits on the blockchain to bring more transparency to that market, which again, I don't know enough about the carbon credit market, but I know it's kind of corrupted. Yeah. And so transparency via blockchain actually, again, doesn't sound like it's probably a terrible idea. It's just, he's just such a joke in a headline because the WeWork thing was just such a like crazy, just such a perfect microcosm of the excesses of that time. And he was a perfect example of just like the like, I'm going to be barefoot and like, it's all about while I take $1 billion off the fucking table before my company IPOs, like the hypocrisy there of this, like, it's all about like the natural flow of like who we all are. But like conveniently, I have a $750 million, off the backs of this thing. So he's an easy punchline. I don't love that. He's the one getting this money, but I actually understand the bet. Okay. I think that is the show. Blake, this was so much fun. Honestly, like I want you to come back a lot because you just know so much and are just so smart and fun. And this was great. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.